atheism anyways? According to dictionary.reference.com, atheism is the doctrine or belief that there is no God, disbelief in the existence of a supreme being or beings. According to Webster's 9th New Collegiate Dictionary, which you may have at home as I do, atheism is a disbelief in the existence of deity, the doctrine that there is no deity. PhilosophyPages.com says that atheism is belief that God does not exist. Unlike the agnostic, who merely criticizes traditional arguments for the existence of a deity, the atheist must offer evidence. PhilosophyDictionary.org says that atheism is the denial of the existence of God. God does not exist. I think that going to philosophy dictionaries is probably a really good way to discover the meaning of atheism, since it's a very philosophically heavy, meaningful term. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, atheism means the negation of theism, the denial of the existence of God. These are all strong, assertive things. The University of Aberdeen's Glossary of Technical Terms also agrees and says that an atheist is someone who believes that there is no God. This doesn't seem like much of a debate, but what about some of the atheist websites? What do they say atheism is? On infidels.org, under the title What is Atheism?, it says atheism is characterized by an absence of belief in the existence of gods. At atheism.about.com, it is defined as not believing in any gods. These are very weak, very soft definitions of atheism. I wonder why.
Atheism. I don't think it means what you mean it to mean. Your words are confusing me when you put it that way. Why make it confusing when you can just say it plain? If you believe there is no God, just come out with a claim. Lack of belief in God makes your stance sound weak and lame. Atheism. You say that my baby's lacking a belief in God. Well, I can say the same thing about my lucky fishing rod. I don't need no big words to prove that concept wrong. So I thought I'd make fun of it, singing in this song. Atheism. Yeah. Philosophically, I think you may have missed that simply a lack of belief does not make an atheist. I'm not trying to make fun or suggest that we should hate. Just want to keep some other folks from making that mistake. Atheism. Yeah.
You're listening to the Bible Thumping Wingnut Show, the show that's safe for the whole family. Unless your family contains professing atheists.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Atheist Experience featuring me, the Bible Thumping Wingnut, Len Pettis of Grappling with Theology, and our control room guy, eye patch guy from the control room. All of us right here happily for your apologetics in Christianity. Len Pettis, my goodness, that introduction has caused so many people to really just
hashtag triggered.
Yeah.
Hashtag snowflakes.
They if I could figure out how to unmute. There he goes. Okay. Then he'll be free to speak. We're working. I can't do it. Maybe I'll try to do it when Len is speaking, but I just can't do it right now.
I just unclick. Is it working?
Yeah, that would be it. You needed to unclick. I was trying to do something. All right. So we're all here and all the technology is working. Today is April 22nd. This is the third podcast that Len Pettis and I have recorded this evening. And he's well fed. I can tell you he's eaten plenty in previous episodes, and we're good to go. Tonight, the Atheist Experience has, let me see who it has. I forget who it's Matt Dillahunty and Jen Peeples. Before we get right into it, let me tell you, Bible Thumping Wingnut is just one of many podcasts. This Atheist Experience is just one of many podcasts. You can get other podcasts at BibleThumpingWingnut.com. Go there for excellent apologetics, articles, blog posts on Christian living, podcasts about all kinds of things, including jujitsu, Christian Jiu-Jitsu podcast, Len Pettis, Grappling with Theology, Living in the Vine, Pastor Adam Staub's podcast for kids even. And this podcast is brought to you by Wrath and Grace. Go to wrathandgrace.com, support them. They've got a conference coming up. We're all excited about that. We will be sharing the details with you concerning that real soon. How are you today, Len? He's very quiet.
Oh, I had my microphone muted. I think I've never done this before. And what is wrong with me today? I'm good, brother. I am fatter than a tick.
Fatter than a tick.
Potluck. I can't stop eating.
Oh, church potluck.
Yeah, I have no self-control today.
That's what you're talking about.
Gluttony. Terrible gluttony.
Yep.
I should talk him a fat dude.
All right. Let us, as I play with the camera and all this stuff, if you're listening on the podcast version, feel free to click on the video version. We're on YouTube live as we do this on this Sunday night and every Sunday night. And so you can listen to it on the podcast, or you can watch it on the video. And we're also Facebook Live. Thank you to the eye patch guy, John, in the control room. What do you think we're going to hear today, Len?
I have a feeling we're going to hear kind of the same old stuff, to be honest with you. Just in having done this, for about a month and a half now, I don't know if we've heard anything really new. So hopefully, I'm hoping for new things today, but I'm not very optimistic, to be honest.
We're going to jump right into their first call, which is Jacqueline in Nashville. We'll start pretty soon. Let me jump in here.
I'm firing my lawn service or something like that. Right. Where we're just done. I mean, this is a large nonprofit public organization with a public figure formerly at the head of it. And so, yeah, just keep exercising some patience and don't call in to ask questions because I can't answer them.
Yeah. Well, and my only comment on that is that there are so many people out there speculating blindly, as you said, about why he was fired.
Who was fired?
I would hazard a guess.
Oh, we missed it.
And say that most of them are getting it completely wrong.
Oh, that's
right. Know
right.
what the board saw. I don't know what the board saw.
What's his name?
But I do know that whatever they saw, it was enough that they voted
know that guy's name,
without
Len?
dissent. So 15 board members voted without dissent to terminate his contract.
Including people who've been friends with him for decades.
Right.
Do you know who they're talking about, Len?
This was not something trivial. Yeah. You know, it's not.
The guy who's been he was on with Cy Ten Bruggen, Kate Silverman.
He was fired from what? From
the atheist president. He was the president of the Atheists America. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Turn your mic up, man.
Turn my mic up, like louder. You want it louder? Is that better?
Yeah. So remember, he was. The article said that he was fired for inappropriate behavior of some kind.
Oh, that would shock me. Hashtag me too.
You know, somebody wants his job. They're just trying to get back at him, or any of those things that people are claiming right now.
But the cool thing is, once the investigation is complete and the information's out, you are free to make up your own mind.
Right.
Until then, if you've already made up your mind, you are failing at skepticism and perhaps quite a bit more. But on that note, the ACA elections are coming up. Is it next weekend? No, it's the weekend after.
It is going to be the first, I think it's 2 weeks from now. So the first Sunday in May.
Yes. So that'll be 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Yep. So any members of the atheist community of Austin, check the website and look for information about how you can participate and be involved. And we're always eager for folks to be involved. I'm not involved. I show up and do a show every now and then, and I'm always thrilled that that there's an audience, both for the Magic and Skepticism thing and for this. Bunch of people sitting on the other side of the glass, coming from all over the place. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Yeah, it's like hello, Cleveland. Let me just get another round of applause.
Yeah.
I don't know if we had anything else. If we just wanted to go to calls.
Yeah, I think we can just go to calls.
Awesome. We'll start off in Nashville, Tennessee with Jacqueline. Thanks for waiting.
Hello, how are you, Matt? I'm
doing well.
So I've been questioning my faith for a long time, and I'm not really, like, I'm pretty sure that I'm, like, atheistic by now, but I don't know, I still have, like, fears, and, like, there's still things that keep me from completely just, like, accepting it. Like, I have fears that I could be wrong. I have fears that I might still go to hell. I mean, because I don't know, I just have a fear of being wrong in my assertion that maybe there isn't a God. That still scares me.
Okay. So, you're afraid you're going to go to hell? Is that?
I mean, I'm afraid I could be wrong. Like,
okay.
I'm afraid I could be wrong. That's where I would go. Like, it's still a terrifying thing. I don't know, because maybe there's some evidence I haven't evaluated somewhere.
Sure, but is that your fault?
No.
I mean, my position, you know, if there's a God out there, and the evidence is such that I haven't discovered it in my honest searching, then maybe that God's trying a little too hard to hide. But at the end of the day, if there is a God who says, Matt, you didn't believe. And I say, well, I didn't see convincing evidence. And he says, well, did you look? And my answer is yes. I looked a lot. I looked a lot more than a lot of other people who seem to find stuff. And whenever I would talk to the people who found evidence, they would present bad evidence and fallacious reason. But there's no reason for that, you know, God to ask me those questions at all, because presumably he would know.
Right.
That I was being intellectually honest, that I am just unconvinced. And if he wants to punish me, well, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand. And I know, like, it sounds irrational, but like, since we years indoctrinated, I still think I could be wrong.
Sure.
Like, I'm screwed.
I mean, and that's the thing. We could all be wrong. And that's why we continue to look for evidence wherever we should find evidence.
We could all be wrong. And his little scenario there that he's making of what it would, his conversation with God that he's imagining he's going to have. What do you think of that, Len?
Some bad assumptions. Some bad assumptions in that. Okay. So first of all, he is not a man who lacks evidence. He is a man suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. So evidence is never the problem of the unbeliever. Never. It's never a lack of evidence. Okay. The glory, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in their unrighteousness. All right, so this is an issue of not evidence. Okay, the other assumption is that he's going to stand before God and have a conversation. No, God's going to break your knees with a rod of iron and cast you into hell for your sin, for your truth suppression. It's not going to be like, okay, well, here's your opportunity to explain to me what went wrong here. What went wrong here, Mr. Atheist?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is this guy, he still is afraid that he could be wrong. He still has a fear that he could go to hell, and there's this indoctrination. Maybe he just hasn't examined all of the evidence. He doesn't have an evidence problem either. You know, he no more has an evidence problem than Matt Dillahunty does. So just many bad assumptions within this conversation. And so if God's going to punish me for not giving me enough evidence, well, look, if you're caught speeding because you were looking down at your phone texting when you drove past the speed limit sign, you're still guilty. You know, ignorance of the law is never an excuse. The problem is we're not dealing with a case of ignorance here. That's my whole point to this conversation. So to this individual who is fearing hell, lacking evidence by his so-called profession, you know, again, evidence assumes truth. Where do you get truth without God? Okay. So when you're asking for evidence, you're assuming a standard of truth. You please now justify that for me. Okay. That's the route I would take this conversation. I wish these people would contact Bible Thumping Wingnut instead of Matt Dillahunty. But this is the thing about, I don't want to rant because I know that this could turn into a long show. I don't know how many callers that they have or whatever, but this is a person who is hoping Matt can ease his conscience. He isn't seeking truth. None seek after God, people. Okay, Christians, are you listening? When we're talking about evangelism here, there is no truth seeker. That's how the Greek literally renders Romans chapter 3. There is no truth seeker. This isn't a person seeking truth. This is a person who is looking for his conscience to be eased.
Yeah.
I hope Dillahunty is unsuccessful in helping him do that.
You can see their offering is coming in tonight.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
And I mean, even after all these years, you know, people still make these claims about God. They present them here on this show. We examine the evidence that they present, and we're still unconvinced. So it's not that you have to shut down the pursuit of evidence, or that you just, you know, drive a stake in the ground and say, this is it, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, you can continue to evaluate evidence.
Yep. There's nothing preventing you from changing your mind should evidence come along.
Right. And but I mean, one of the things I think is going to happen, because we've seen this before, and a lot of us have been through this. The more you study religion, and particularly your religion that you came out of, the more you examine the claims, and the more, I guess, the more practice you get at evaluating them and then rejecting bad evidence, the less the fear is going to be. That is really the path to, I guess, shaking off that fear. It's just keep looking for evidence, keep evaluating it.
Yeah, the other thing, I've mentioned this many times before, which hell are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Judeo-Christianity hell.
Why? Is it the worst one?
Well, I mean, there's other religions with hell, but
I think Muslim hell's worse.
Yeah, I mean, so the question is, should you try to avoid the worst hell, or should you try to seek out the best heaven? But if you're primarily worried about the hell that you were indoctrinated to believe or that you previously accepted, and you don't have a good reason for why you should be more worried about that one than some other one, it seemed to me that you're now in the position of, I should be afraid of all of them or none of them. I mean, I don't mean to be glib, because these are serious. You know, if this is true, this is the single most important thing that we could probably know, whether or not there's a God and an afterlife and what we can do about it. But I'm convinced that in my case, I've been as honest and as thorough about investigating this as I can. I have not reached a permanent conclusion. All my conclusions are tentative. If somebody comes up with better evidence tomorrow, I'm fine with it. But today, I'm honestly more worried about whether or not Infinity War is going to be great or suck than I am about whether or not there's a hell, because at least in my life, Infinity War is probably going to play a bigger role than an afterlife.
Well, may I ask you one more quick question, and then I'll get off the line?
Of course.
Okay, so
Len Pettis, I see your hand.
Yeah, so he's asking him, which hell are you afraid of? The only one. You notice whenever anybody calls to ask, and this is, I think, the second or third time we've had a caller that's called in expressing a fear of hell. It's interesting. They all fear the Christian hell. They all fear the Christian God because it's the one they know exists. It's the one they intuitively know exists. Look, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, I think it's chapter 12, talks about how man has a natural fear of death. Why?
Right.
Why does man naturally fear death? You're not here anymore. I mean, there's nothing, you can't do anything about anything that's left behind. So what's the point? Why would you fear that? Well, because you don't know what's on the other side. Or worse yet, you do know what's on the other side. And so you do things like call into an atheist show to have your conscience eased about that. Like, please talk me out of this belief, this thing I innately have within me. Please talk me out of this. Sad. It's very sad.
Yep.
Well, isn't the suppression of truth, isn't that word a constant thing? And I think that's what a lot of people who watch these shows is they need to get their little dose of suppressing of truth, a little pat on the back going, oh yeah, sure, what you believe is correct. What you believe is correct.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, John. I mean, suppression of truth. I've heard this analogy, and I've made this analogy myself, in that it's like holding a beach ball underwater at the beach. The second you take any pressure off of it, it pops right back up. So you need to be paying, if you're going to hold that beach ball underwater, you must be paying constant attention to it. So yes, it is, and I believe in the Greek, it is in the aorist, so it is an ongoing thing. It's not a past tense thing. I may be wrong about that, and if anyone wants to correct me on that, just feel free to do so. But yeah, that's a good point, John.
Part I really struggle with, and you can tell me if this gets easier, but I still feel guilty for because I don't see the evidence, and I know it's probably not true, but I still feel like a bad person because I no longer believe it. And people where I live have told me you cannot believe because that makes you a bad person for some reason. I don't know. I deal with a lot of guilt.
That's abusive. You don't have to take that shit from anybody.
I just sat on stage with Jordan Peterson the other day, and he flatly said that a real atheist would essentially be a murderer, and then he doesn't think any of us who are decent are actually atheists. So this doesn't stop, in rural areas. This goes to...
Nor do we. We don't think you're atheist either. I would support Jordan Peterson's assumptions there.
Yep.
His assertion. Why not address as atheists how no one should feel any guilt from your worldview?
Right.
Here's someone saying, hey, I feel bad.
Well, conscience means with knowledge. Con is with, science is knowledge. So he knows, it's, when you get to the point where Matt Dillahunty is, where he's just, at the point where, it doesn't even bother him. He prefers the movie more than he, worries about hell or anything like that. Your conscience is already seared by that time. And that's really, really sad with a lot of these people on here. It's God can do anything, but it's basically their heart is hardened and their conscience is seared, and they just don't care anymore. And it's really, really sad.
Well, I don't know if he would qualify for the heights of academia, but certainly there are plenty of well-educated people who buy into this garbage. And yet when you ask them, what's the justification for this? In his case, he'll say that you probably are a good person, but it's because you secretly believe in God or because there is a God. When people want to tell you that just because you are unconvinced that this makes you a bad person, ask them why. Because I think most of it's going to come out of their fear about their own doubts.
Well, and like I said, I know you have other callers, and that's cool and all, but I think a lot of that isn't internal. I think I internalize some of that guilt myself. Like some of that is like eternal, like you should believe, but I really just, I want to believe. I just don't have any reason to anymore. I really don't. I've looked at all the evidence and I just don't see a reason to believe, but I still feel guilt. And I'm not sure why I feel that way.
So let me ask you this. Do you try to be a decent person?
What's a decent person?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Have you honestly looked at the issue and remain unconvinced?
Well, yeah, because
then what the hell do you have to feel guilty about? This is not guilt. Guilt is something that you take upon yourself when you're convinced that you've done something wrong. What this is shame. This is other people trying.
Which no atheist should ever feel any guilt, because they should never feel that they've done anything wrong. That point being said, Len, do you know any males by the name of Jacqueline?
Well, yeah, it's funny. He's doing like the reverse good person test to him. That's what I find interesting. It's like, you know, do you try to do good things? Yes. Do you? Like, okay, let's just go right down the road. Now, by what standard are, you know, because he's speaking directly to morality here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a good person? By what standard? I mean, yeah, line me up against Hitler and I'm doing great. Line me up against Stalin, line me up against most good church people and I'm good. But when we look at the standard by which we are going to be judged, which is Christ, according to Romans chapter 2, that is the marker. That is the Christ is the standard that we have to live up to if we are going to earn anything meritorious in and of ourselves. Guess what? We can't. Conceived in sin, brought forth in iniquity, dead in our trespasses and our sins, you know, doomed from the womb, if you will, you know, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's a huge issue, is that when we put up a non-arbitrary standard, because that's all atheists are ever going to use is an arbitrary standard. Well, you know, just do the least bit of harm, and that's not the standard. That is not the standard you're going to be held to. It's arbitrary. It's
right.
Meaningless. And by the way, if to be consistent as an atheist, there can be no morality. None.
Right.
So why are you even asking, Matt Dillahunty?
Yeah.
and plus they said that they could be wrong. So, you know, it's like you could be wrong about anything. Well, you could, you know, it's kind of pointless in that.
Well, yeah, right. And which begs the question, well, what do you actually know? That's what I would like to know is, what do you actually know and how do you know it? You know, forget it, like, oh, I could be wrong about everything. Great. Well, just tell me one thing you know.
To make you ashamed that you don't believe what they believe. And that's on their head, not yours.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate your time, and I thank you for just talking to me for a few minutes, and I hope you all have a great day.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. This is one of the more insidious aspects of religious indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
It's this ability to make people feel ashamed for being human and doing a very human thing, like examining the evidence for something and reaching a different conclusion than maybe the majority of the people around you.
Yeah.
And then living your life as honestly as possible.
There's an argument against the existence of God that I'm a huge fan of, which is the argument from Divine Hiddenness. And it's kind of, I talked about it before, it's kind of complicated. There's another aspect to the argument from Divine Hiddenness, which I think has been termed as the argument from multiple revelations or along those lines. But at the end of the day, I've hosted this show for 13, 14 years. I have fielded hundreds, if not thousands, of theistic calls. And you can say that I've hardened my heart, or that my mind is closed, or whatever else. But you can't point to an actual theist who's called this show and presented a reasonable evidence-based argument for the existence of God. If you can, It would be the one and only argument that would keep coming up. It would win the Templeton Prize, the Nobel Prize. It would be convincing people left and right. And instead of people calling in to this show saying, hey, I'm experiencing some doubts and some shame, and I'm not quite sure, what you would have is call after call basically saying, Matt, you are an idiot who has closed your mind. Here's this obvious argument. Because it reminds me, there are certainly people who are seemingly immune to reason and unwilling to consider evidence fairly. We call some of them flat earthers. Yeah, that's not what's happening.
Let me chime in here. Again, so he's looking for evidence, and remember, evidence presumes truth. So what is truth in an atheistic worldview? That's the question. Okay? Not your truth, not my truth. What is truth? What is truth by its very definition? And how can you justify it from an atheistic worldview? You can't. It's impossible. So, oh, and by the way, excuse me, Henson James, we've covered this before, but I'll say it again because I've never seen you in chat before. We don't need to call into the show. We have a show covering this show. So we don't need to call in. We've engaged with Matt Dillahunty. We've had him in Google Hangouts before. Tim's sat across the table for him and spoken to him live. So we don't need to call in. Okay, they hang up on callers like us, so it doesn't matter. We have the words that are coming out of his mouth right now. So, but back to this idea of evidence, you can't even justify a standard of truth in any sense as an atheist and remain consistent. And when you do, you expose that you know that God exists. So I see that you had Sid on screen. Yeah. Does he have something to add?
I thought he did, but then he didn't.
You know what I like about Sid? He is a consistent atheist. He never makes any truth claims.
Right.
He's never argued in favor of morality or against morality, by the way. A very consistent atheist. Good evening, Sid. Anything to add tonight? Did you turn his mic on?
No. He doesn't ever say anything. The mic's there for.
You don't even have a cord running.
No, it's
to that
not
mic.
Plugged in. Actually,
Joachim West says some people say that cinder block wins and quote the Bible where it says that it's better to be silent and thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Actually, I don't know if the Bible says that. I think that was an Abraham Lincoln quote, but nonetheless, it's true. Anyhow, we can carry on with the show now unless you have something to add, Tim.
Unbelievers are one of the fastest growing religious identifications. When there has been a debate, countless debates for millennia on this subject, and it's not like, Scientific American has published the article on here's why we're sure God exists. And until that changes, we'll keep having the conversations, and religions will keep losing because they don't come up with new evidence. They don't come up with solid arguments. They trot out the same things they've been trotting out forever.
Yeah.
And if they can't convince you with an argument, then they will try with their best to make you feel ashamed or inferior for not agreeing. And that is disgusting. And it's probably all you need to know. I mean, you can learn logical fallacies, and I recommend, learning as much as you can about reason. But the mere fact that when painted into a corner, the best thing that theists, or the most common thing theists are likely to do is say that it just all comes down to faith.
Yeah.
Which you can address why that's problematic. Or you're just an awful person who rejects God.
You just want to sin.
Yeah, y'all just want to sin. Yeah. One of my favorite videos I ever did.
All right, I wanted to address this. Matt,
that's timely, isn't it?
What's that?
I was going to say that's kind of perfect timing.
Yeah.
Actually.
Matt just said that his favorite video is the video he made where he refutes the concept of you just want to sin. You just want to sin. Yeah, back it up a little bit. We'll hear it again.
Person who rejects God.
You just want to sin.
Yeah, y'all just want to sin.
Yeah.
One of my favorite videos I ever did. All right, here we go.
So they're going to go to the next caller, I think. But before we go to the next caller with them, they're laughing at this concept that some Christians have said to them as atheists. Some Christians have said, well, you just want to be an atheist because you just want to sin. And Matt Dillahunty actually did a video, a Patreon project video that he got paid thousands of dollars to make, where he's sitting on the edge of a field, I think, with flowers behind him, and he's explaining in great detail how that's false. I'm not an atheist because I want to sin. And I watched that, and I was reminded of a presentation that he did about that. And I made a short video. I'm going to play I'm going to play it right here, just part of it. And in the beginning of a lot of my videos that I address atheism, I like to share the gospel, and at the end, of course. And I'm kind of wrapping up with the gospel presentation in the beginning. But I wanted to share this because Matt brought it up, his concept about that atheists aren't atheists just because they want to sin. No atheist would ever say that.
The truth and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So atheists must reject the truth because they claim there is no God. An argument against atheism is that you just became an atheist because you want to sin. I've never made that claim, but many people do. Let's hear what Matt Dillahunty has to say on this issue.
So I'm wondering, have they actually investigated Carrier's claims? Or is this just an attempt to smear someone?
So this video that I'm showing is the video that he said was one of his favorite videos. He really enjoyed making it.
Is this just an attempt to poison the well with this common kind of Christian attack of, oh, you atheists, you just love your sin. God has given you over to reprobate minds. You just don't want to live in a world governed by God. Y'all just love to sin. Essentially, the core claim here is that atheists, rather than honestly rejecting supernatural claims on the basis of insufficient evidence, have instead merely looked for some reason to reject the God that they don't want to serve. We're in love with our sin. The problem with this entire line of argument is that it essentially calls us liars. It's essentially saying that, yes, we hear you guys talk about evidence and burden of proof, but you're not really an atheist because of that. You're really just an atheist because you love to sin and you did not want to live under the yoke of God or under the responsibility of appealing and obeying God's positions. They don't offer any evidence of this.
I don't think we need to provide any evidence for this because we'll just let you do it.
And one of the things that atheists often get criticized for is, or I have and others have, is this claim that, well, y'all just want to sin. And we're quick to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not actually it. We actually have reasoned arguments. We've thought about this. We've considered it. It's not just that we want to sin. Screw that. It's okay to not believe if you just want to sin. It really is. And what I mean by that is religions tell people to divorce themselves from who they are, who you are as human beings. Oh, you can't be gay. Screw you. If I'm gay, I'm gay. If you want to call it sinning and you don't think that's a good enough reason for me to stop believing in your God who you think made me and now I'm this way and there's nothing I can do about it, or you want to call it a choice or whatever else, it doesn't matter. Now, hopefully, we come to better arguments and better reasons and justify our positions better later on. But the number of people who actually do stop believing because they want to, quote, sin is probably pretty high. And they're all right to do it.
That is my favorite Matt Dillahunty. Well, actually, I have a lot of favorite Matt Dillahunty videos. Ladies and gentlemen, the more you watch and study the arguments of people like Matt Dillahunty, the easier it is to find the complete inconsistencies. You can watch him debate Seitan Bruggencate and then watch him on the Atheist Experience, and he's completely refuting himself. The arguments that he used against Sai, he doesn't use here. Matter of fact, if he did, it just would make no sense. That's why he doesn't use it.
Literally make a video of Matt Dillahunty debating himself.
Right.
With all of the footage he has contradicting himself. The man is a walking contradiction.
So I just thought I would play that to demonstrate that he's lying right now. He almost 3,000 people are watching this video. Look at that, Len. I exaggerated. 2,700.
Well, yeah. Well, he's lying now, or he was lying then. But either way, he's a liar.
Right.
But people call us liars. I don't like being called a liar. Then here's an idea. Don't lie. Don't lie if you don't like being called a liar, Matt. Come on now.
Let's see where they go next.
Where we go next?
All right. Do we want to take Zach or Cameron next?
Why don't we do Corey, because he helped us with the call at the beginning?
Let's do that. Yep.
Corey in Illinois, thanks for waiting.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Matt. How are you guys?
Good.
Pretty good.
Hey, happy to be on the show. Longtime big fan here in rural Illinois. Own little Bible. Yeah, very rural there. My neighbors are cornfields. Well, I wanted to call in today and kind of quickly discuss two items. I know one.
We're losing you.
Guys,
you might be too
can you hear
rural.
me?
That cornfield might not have the best reception.
The cornfields aren't great for reception. Hopefully the audio quality is better. If not, feel free to drop me.
Try and at least get the question out so that if we have to drop you, we can address it and you can hear it in the recording.
Okay, great. There we go. So I often find myself in debates with local friends, dinner parties, etc. And it usually comes down to we don't agree on the evidence, or there isn't enough evidence to go either way, and it ends up in a tea kettle and Saturn's ring. So I often try and challenge their assessment, and that usually starts with going at their moral system. Well, in an online Facebook debate with some of my veteran friends, I came across an apologetic rebuttal I didn't know how to handle. I was hoping you guys could help me with that, because I thought it was fairly novel. And that was the issue of consent and how it works within the framework of moral well-being and how that applies to theistic.
I hope they clear this up, because it's an interesting question coming up.
They brought up the Mosaic Covenant, and because God's people had consented to be governed by these laws, that makes what we would normally as immoral practice, because people are it becomes a moral system.
Please make it stop.
I had an issue
Matt.
with that. And I wondered how you guys would combat that.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and leave you on hold where you can hear us, because that dropped a lot, and I'll see if I can get back to you, because there's two things to address in what you said. First thing is, if you're having these discussions, as you said, and you get to a point where you agree that there's not enough evidence to go either way, you just won. That's the end, because this isn't there's enough.
This isn't about taking a position. It's about pointing out that no position could possibly be right. That's why he just said what he said. You've won.
Yeah, he's teaching the Dillahunty dodge.
Evidence to believe there is a God versus there's enough evidence to believe there's not a God. That's two different propositions. That's like if the number of blades of grass on the planet is either even or odd, and you agree that you don't have enough information to determine whether it's even or odd, then by default, you can't accept either proposition. And so your position is that you do not believe it's even. But these people are believing that it's even while acknowledging there's not enough evidence. You won. They are convinced there's a God while acknowledging that there's not enough evidence to convince somebody there's a God, which puts them in a state of conflict when it comes to reason. Atheism is not necessary.
which is why when we engage with atheists, professing atheists, we need to use biblical apologetics. And the Bible says that all men know. So all men know.
So we win. We know we win, according to what he's saying there, it sounds.
So we win.
Necessarily the assertion that there is no God or that the blade of grass is odd, the number is odd. It is, we do not accept that there is a God, or we do not accept that there is true, that it's even, for example, with grass. It's a little, none of those analogies are going to be perfect, but at the end of the day, if they're telling you there's not enough evidence, then the question isn't, oh, well, I guess we're stuck. And the question then is, then why do you believe? If there's not enough evidence, you're basically telling me you're believing me based on insufficient evidence. The other thing with regard to forming a foundational morality by getting people to agree to something, first of all, the only person that could have agreed to the Noahic covenant was Noah, not Noah's descendants. He can't bind his descendants or anybody else forever. So even if there was some sort of implied moral contract there, it ends at the person who agreed to it. And second of all, there is the notion that you can assent to things under threat, and it doesn't make it moral.
Right.
And if there's a God being who's essentially holding a gun to your head to say, these are the rules that you're going to follow if you want to be my preferred people, that's roughly the equivalent of a mafia boss saying, hey, it's a nice store. It would be a shame if there was something to happen to it. So I don't know how they get to any kind of grounding in morality that way. Does that answer those for you?
I don't know how he gets to make any moral claims at all right there. What's wrong with a mafia boss doing that?
Does the mafia exist? And what is his evidence?
You don't know if I exist, my friend. Let me tell you something. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
I think that really answers it for the most part. My one kind of concern in playing God's advocate is I feel like as a society, maybe we've sent it to at least morally something based on, our ancestors, etc., in our own moral or experimental paths. And so I see that playing either way. And it starts to chase down a rabbit hole at that point if we're doing the same thing.
If other people in society have somehow assented to agree to go by some God's recommendation, that has no bearing on whether or not I have to.
I'll certainly take that fair point.
Mm-hmm. If a society agrees to anything being immoral, you don't have to subscribe to it. No matter what it's based on, you don't have to subscribe to it. That should be the atheist response. Doesn't matter.
And if you can still hear me well enough,
we can't. Go to the next caller
and then let me jump off the line.
Okay.
And the other one is about the idea of worship in general. It's something
and we lost you. All right.
So one of the things I was going to comment, I kind of got the impression he was going toward this whole consent to the governed thing, which is kind of the basis for our government.
Yes.
The difference between like some covenant that's handed down through your ancestors that, they consented to, but you didn't have any voice in, and the system we live under is that if we decide that a law is unjust and we don't want to live by that law anymore, we can change it.
Yep.
We're not bound by, laws that were in place centuries ago. So for example, slavery, we decided that was unjust. It's in the Bible. They tell you how to do it in the Bible. It was in our laws. We decided at some point that that was actually worth fighting a war over. And so we ended up.
All of a sudden they're using the Bible to make points. It's funny how they do that.
Yeah, according to them, the Bible could be wrong. It could, anything could be wrong. Why use something that may not be true? The Bible tells you all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it does. But according to them, it's not divinely inspired. So.
Yeah, and certainly they would have to confess that their interpretation of the scripture could be wrong.
Changing that. That's one of many things. Women voting.
Oh, damn. I was getting ready to go there by saying, why are you speaking, Jen?
Yes.
Once upon a time, you couldn't vote or speak your mind.
Or own property or all kinds of things, But yeah, our system can evolve over time as our desires change, as we recognize that something is unjust. We can change it.
There's a number of aspects about consent.
Why is the standard justice? It's just completely arbitrary for her to say justice.
Yeah, and if the majority of the people vote to make a law that says to, murder everyone with your last name, are you going to go by that law? Of course not. And that's basically, it's okay if the majority of the people say it, is basically what she's going with. And that's, when it boils down to, especially, talking with professing atheists about morality and whatnot, it boils down to it's the individual, because you can go to the society and go all the way down, but it goes down to the individual, and individual cannot be your standard of morality, because if each individual decides what's moral and that's what you truly believe, then if someone thinks it's moral to rape someone in your family, you'd have to go, okay, that's what I believe, so here you go. That's not what they believe, because God's a standard.
One of which I'd love to talk about perhaps at another time in another show. But consent is an ongoing process. And especially when we're talking about interpersonal relationships, this is something everybody needs to drill in their head, because I hear a lot of complaints from people about, oh, well, Me Too and the accusations and all this stuff. It's made it so that I feel like I need to get a signed contract before I can have sex with somebody. Well, guess what? You're an idiot. Because a signed contract isn't going to help you either, because somebody can sign a contract consenting to have sex with you, and then after the sex gets started, they can still say no, because you can revoke that consent at any time. That's not going to help you. You know what's going to help you? Not being a dick, communicating with somebody, asking, hey, here's the thing. First of all, enthusiastic consent. Yes, enthusiastic, informed consent. Awesome. But the only reason to not ask somebody, a potential sex partner, if they are into the things you're into, is because you're afraid they're going to say no and you won't get laid. Right. You are going down the road of forgiveness is.
Oh my. A moral rant by a professing atheist.
By what standard?
Why is consent the standard?
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
I mean, ducks rape to propagate their species, and Aaron Roth thinks that's pretty cool. So apparently, he has a different standard than Matt Dillahunty.
Oh,
Duck lives matter.
Don't have to go.
Hashtag duck too.
Go into the atheist from Vietnam who makes all kinds of great arguments for having sexual contact with children without consent, and grown adults making claims that they're better adults today because someone touched them sexually when they were a child, when they didn't give consent.
Yeah,
we've got that piece of evidence. So what makes that person wrong? And your atheist rant, right? You're
easier than getting permission. But I got news for you. There's somebody out there that has every one of your kinks, and if you just talk to them beforehand, not only would you never be in a situation where you're going to be outed as a sexual predator, you're going to have better sex. Why would you not want to do that? Oh, it's because you're not going to necessarily have better sex right now with this person. You are being incredibly selfish and putting your own issues ahead of everybody else's. Consent is not some pitfall that we need to avoid. It's really good, and it's really much easier than a lot of douche bros are making it out to be.
Well, yeah, somebody had.
Why is waiting good? Why not satisfy yourself now?
What is good without God? By what standard? I mean, oh my goodness. Do you see how he's exposing his knowledge of the existence of God with every word that comes out of his mouth?
He's dependent upon Christianity to make the claims that he's making, the moral 100%. Claims he's making.
Yep.
And I wish I had the person that tweeted this, but they tweeted out this deal about it was about consent, and it said, stick your finger up a straight guy's ass during sex, and you'll find out they actually do understand consent, boundaries, and withdrawing consent.
Some of them.
Yeah. Or he might be into that.
Yeah. But if you'd have asked first, it would have been much better.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's an argument for the surprise element for the people who appreciate that. But guess what? You can have that discussion too. You just don't tell them when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Hey, you like surprises? I've got a good one for you. Promise. All right. Welcome to the Consent Show.
Guess we're going to have to start giving disclaimers before we start airing this every week.
Yeah.
Where every single person who calls in consents to interacting and having their stuff recorded.
Don't stick your finger up somebody's ass during sex.
Yeah.
Unless you've talked about that first.
It's frustrating because, you know, I realize that there's a good chunk of people who actually get it. But I really do. I mean, I really do think that it's important to realize that you should be engaged in a little self-reflection. Why? What is it you're afraid of that you're not willing to have the conversation? And I heard a great talk in Nashville, which not only, and I apologize, I've forgotten the name of the person because I was busy getting ready to the show. Not only do I want to credit them with the only reason that you're not asking is because you're afraid they'll say no, and the other comments about it getting better. There was another aspect of that where if you engage in just a little self-reflection and consider why you might be afraid of this. If you're not adult enough to be open to having those kind of conversations, you are definitely not adult enough to be engaging in those things.
Right.
And I will look up who said all that in Nashville at NanoCon, and we'll get it posted because they deserve all the credit for giving me much easier ways to talk about it.
Well, and it's like what Dan said.
Wouldn't that be something to be in an atheist conference and there's somebody talking about moral like what's moral in regards to sexual contact with somebody else? That's bizarre. Strange.
But they don't love to sin. They're not atheists because they love sin, Tim.
Well, that's not what the people in the hotels and motels that they stay in during these conventions, from what I hear. I hear it gets pretty nuts when all these people get together.
Savage talks about sometimes that people want to jump into like varsity level kink without having like built up to that. You know, you don't go from.
All right, we'll try to find the next caller.
Because if something's only moral because God says so, then when God says, "Hey, you can own slaves and you can run off and murder these people," then.
Zach and Hagerman.
Dilemma is brought up a lot, which is this idea of
the Euthyphro Dilemma.
Our discussion about the Euthyphro Dilemma, and that was.
And you'll have to forgive me, Zach. Zach, you'll have to forgive me because you'll have to. I know you're getting ready to tell me what it was, but I don't actually remember it, and I wouldn't want to be accused of strawmanning anybody. So let's just shelve whatever was before and talk about whatever you want to talk about today, which can be what we talked about before.
Okay, sure. So basically the idea is that the Euthyphro Dilemma is brought up a lot, which is this idea of, for the sake of the audience, the idea that either God is good because goodness is somehow independent from him, or God basically chooses goodness himself. Is God good because it already is good? Or is good because God says it is?
So you're kind of right, but the Euthyphro Dilemma has nothing to do about whether or not the phrasing it. So the original Euthyphro Dilemma was about piety, and it was, is something pious because the gods say so, or is something pious whether the gods say so or not? And it got moved to talk about morality, which is something moral because God says it's moral, basically divine command theory, or is it moral independent of whether or not God says that it's moral? That's how the Euthyphro Dilemma has been used with regard to morality. Because if something's only moral because God says so, then when God says, "Hey, you can own slaves and you can run off and murder these people," then it's automatically moral. But God could turn around and say the opposite tomorrow. And
okay,
let's
right here. I want to make sure everyone hears the rest of this with the understanding that Matt Dillahunty will deny the fact that there is any kind of absolute morality. Okay, so he has a fluid I don't know. He has a completely arbitrary standard for what morality is. So to even be he's not he's the wrong guy for this job to talk about this. So I think everyone needs to keep that at the forefront of their mind as they listen to Matt Dillahunty talk about anything regarding morality.
And he's so dishonest. He just said that it's moral if God tells you to go murder somebody. God's never told anybody to murder anybody. Huge difference between God bringing judgment on the guilty, which is not murder, and murder. And Matt knows that. He's had it explained to him multiple times. Doesn't seem to matter in this context.
Is moral independent of God, then there's no reason to appeal to God, because you can discover that without a God.
Right. And there may not be any reason to appeal to God. And the issue is that at one point we came, I'm trying to put this in terms of last week's discussion, or January's discussion. Let's see.
Just pause it for the people commenting on YouTube. There's a lot of ignorance going on speaking about what murder is, and instead of killing. If someone is past judgment, someone is judged as guilty of a crime and the punishment is death, the person who goes and brings that judgment, whether it's the person who kills the inmate who on death row, that's not murder the Mott way. I don't know if you're new to the debate or what, but there seems to be, do a little bit of thinking, studying before you keep commenting here.
The thing is that the thing I brought up last time was that God and goodness are ultimately the same thing.
How do we know that? How do we know that?
It's not presented as something that's true. It's something that's presented as a resolution of this dichotomy that the Euthyphro Dilemma presents.
Okay, but it's not a result. That doesn't resolve the dilemma. To say that God and good are synonymous doesn't resolve the dilemma one bit, because the point is to show that either it's arbitrary or God is irrelevant. God, nothing about the Euthyphro Dilemma says that there isn't a God who is in fact good. It just asks, what is the source of goodness? What makes something good or not? So the fact, you can say God and good are synonymous. Okay, I don't agree with you. I don't understand how we got there. But it's also not relevant. It doesn't resolve the dilemma, because all you've done is say that God is good. That doesn't tell us why something is or isn't good.
I'd say that, well, I mean, like, you could ask the question, why is the morning star, we have this idea that the morning star is Venus, or that the Venus is the morning star. And, but there are two different conceptions in our mind. What I'm saying is that ultimately, goodness and God are so synonymous that they can't really be divorced from each other.
I would dispute that. I mean, I don't agree with that.
I mean, it's fine if you don't agree. What I'm saying is that if that were the case, it would resolve the issue.
Well, if frogs had wings, they wouldn't bump their ass a-hopping, but that doesn't have any bearing on anything.
You're saying now that if that is the case, it would resolve the issue, but you haven't even made that case. So we can't even get to how, whether or not that resolves the issue, because you haven't even made that case.
The Euthyphro Dilemma in the first place is on the assumption that there's some sort of God. We're using some sort of assumptions here.
No, it's not contingent on whether or not there's a God. It's addressing claims about originally piety, but
all right, let's hope that they get to another color.
Yeah.
Look at it. It's the end.
Is that the end of the show?
No, maybe they just ended. And my computer needs to refresh here or something like that.
Okay.
The physical facts about reality. That is the objective truth. You know, if I chop off your head.
Right.
Yeah. So what is it that you value about morality that you think is not encompassed by well-being?
Oh, it is getting good. It is getting good. We gotta back up a little bit. I love to talk about well-being.
His question
Did
was
you say objective truth?
maybe.
Yeah, well, that's why I had to rewind it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an aspect of well-being is that it could be better to be dead than alive. And I said, no, it can't be. Because if you're dead, you are not being, well or otherwise. It is about life. So as long as we can agree that we care about well-being, then we can make it.
Why can we agree that well-being is the goal? And who defines what well-being is?
I would like evidence Matt's alive and not dead. I mean, you can't rule out time travel.
Oh, that was hilarious. The time travel thing, that was just hilarious. Who posted? Was that you, Tim, who posted that thing about him talking about the time travel?
Yeah. Yeah. Well-being.
Objective assessments about whether or not actions are consistent with that goal, whether they improve, diminish, or have no effect.
This is the problem with his argument. It's the problem with Sam Harris's book, which I have started reading. And after you read the first chapter, you don't have to read anymore because he just assumes well-being. Matt is assuming well-being is a standard. It's big. There's no reason for him to choose that over being selfish is the standard.
Whether and that would, if you were to put that in moral language, it would be moral, immoral, and amoral, or non-moral if you prefer. But I don't care if somebody calls it morality. I'm just saying that I think this is the best foundation for what people care about is morality. But if you think that there's some morality that transcends well-being, I'm curious as to what it is. What aspect of morality do you think is not covered by well-being as the goal? The foundation is the physical facts about reality.
How is there a goal? How is there a goal?
So frustrating.
I know you are, and that's why you're throwing out all the time travel stuff and like that. Your head is exploding.
Well, it's just frustrating because there are so many logical inconsistencies within this man's worldview. He must just have a salad in his head where a brain is supposed to be. I just don't understand. The man doesn't listen to himself speak.
He makes a living off this, Len. He knows that what he's saying, people eat up, and they don't question him.
It's super profitable, dude.
They've had over $500 come in on Super Chat in this episode, just this episode alone.
That is the objective truth. You know, if I chop off your head,
right?
Think that there's some morality that transcends well-being. I'm curious as to what it is. What aspect of morality do you think is not covered by well-being as the goal? The foundation is the physical facts about reality. That is the objective truth.
Begging the question.
Objective truth.
The foundation is the physical reality of, what did he say? Of reality. The physical reality, which he admits that he cannot know these things. He admits that he cannot know reality, and now he's making a claim to know a fact about.
Think that there's some morality that transcends well-being. I'm curious as to what it is. What aspect of morality do you think is not covered by well-being as the goal? The foundation is the
Matt Dillahunty to justify.
Len. I was just playing the same thing for the fourth time through so I could hear it.
I'm sorry. So frustrated. Okay, I'll stop. I'm going to mute my microphone.
You got to pick an inconsistency and then go with it. There's so many of them. You just got to, like, you know.
I'm curious as to what it is. What aspect of morality do you think is not covered by well-being as the goal? The foundation is the physical facts about reality. That is
physical facts about reality.
What is real? What is real?
The foundation for his morality is the physical facts about reality. That's what he just said, folks, and it's important that you guys catch this, because he has repeatedly said that he can't know what reality is.
Yep. And furthermore, he said it doesn't matter.
Is the objective truth.
That is the
objective. Yeah, and he's claiming objective truth, and he has said several. There is no. We could be wrong about everything. There is no objective truth. You know, and now he's claiming. He's just. Yeah, it's.
We need a buzzer, Len. We need a buzzer, Len. Every time he's inconsistent.
Listen to this guy.
No, it would be a complete bang through the. It would sound like he's swearing through the whole thing if we had an inconsistency buzzer, you know. And plus, do you really want to take 5 hours to complete one of these shows?
Well, let's get some feedback from our video right here. You guys, why do you listen to him when he's so inconsistent? I played a video where he says one thing and then he refutes himself. I mean, he firmly says one thing. This is the way it is. This is the way it is. Atheists don't say we're atheists so that we can sin. And then at another time he says, it's fine. There are a lot of us who say that we're atheists because we like to sin. Complete exposure of inconsistency. And again, here, where he says that he can know physical facts about reality, and you go to any of his debates with Seitan Bruggencate, any engagements with any presuppositionalist who's worth their weight at all, he says, I can't know. I make no claim to know that. Why do you guys listen to, no feedback yet other than LOL.
Yeah, he makes, he's making a claim of objective truth right now, and he's said several times there is no objective truth. So all truth is subjective. Everything is subjective,
Chop off your head.
Right.
Yeah. So what is it that you value about morality that you think is not encompassed by well-being?
The fact that I could say, I can say an ought statement. I can say you should care about well-being. The statement you should care about well-being is a moral statement. The statement person X is weighing under these circumstances is improved.
Well, you can say that either way. You're a non-secular foundation or a secular foundation. Both of us could say that, but in neither case could either of us demonstrate that.
Hello, that's our point. Anybody could say you should care.
Yep.
But nobody can demonstrate that.
Right. And
what if his caller's definition of well-being, or he doesn't believe in well-being, or well-being is just stuff that I like. So, I'm selfish when it comes to well-being. I want to take everyone else's stuff because it's better for my well-being.
Yeah. It's interesting that even brought up probably not intending to, brought up the whole Hume's guillotine, the is-ought dilemma, that you cannot get an ought, you can't get a moral ought from an is. And if you're an evolutionist, you have no reason, no foundation and no basis for any sort of meta-ethical statements, because there's no evolutionary mechanism which can justify it. So, and David Hume recognized this a long time ago, that you therefore cannot get an ought from an is. Evolution is a purely descriptive process. Simply tells us the way things are. It cannot tell us the way things ought to be. So there can be no ought statements if you believe in evolution. You can't say anything ought to be anything. Things are just the way they are. And that's just it. Because evolution, you know.
So the atheist responded in our chat. Since you disagree with Matt, please demonstrate objective morality exists. That is from the Mott Way. Oh, that's not, is that the Christopher Motti way? I don't think so. Demonstrate, you want me to demonstrate that objective morality exists. Well, let me put it to you this way. Is it objectively wrong for me to harm people just because I like to harm people? Not to make them feel better, not because they deserve it, not because I'm doing a scientific experiment, not because I'm a doctor and I need to harm them, but just because I like to see people scream in pain. Is it wrong always for me to do that? Now I've left you, and now I've left the Mott Way in a dilemma here, because in order for him to be consistent with Matt Dillahunty, he has to say, no, it's not always wrong for you to harm people just because you want to. So you're stuck. You either have to demonstrate the folly of atheism, or you have to say, well, yeah, Tim, absolute morality does exist in that situation. So which is it?
I think that in the secular position, we can kind of show that there isn't any way for those ises to produce oughts, whereas there's more of an open question in the theistic perspective.
No. What produces the oughts is defining the goal. Okay.
What goal?
You can't.
What goal? Evolution has no goal. It just is. What is he talking about?
He's throwing out all of his studies, all of his knowledge that he has. He's throwing it out to try to make a moral claim.
He is he is an interesting individual. This is an interesting individual. You have to, how did he word that exactly, Tim? Can you back that up just a tinge?
Yes.
Whereas there's more of an open question in the theistic perspective.
No. What produces the oughts is defining the goal. Okay? Think of it like a chess game. The rules of chess are ultimately arbitrary. They were made up by people. They even changed over the years. We had an en passant, we had a castling, we had this other stuff. The goal is to either win or not lose. Provided there is a goal, and then we're in agreement that there's a goal to chess, we can now analyze the board and determine winning and losing positions. We can analyze moves to determine which moves move us closer towards the goal or which moves move us farther away from the goal. And so when we say you ought to, capture that rook with your knight.
When we decide this is the way it should be, that's the way it should be. We have defined the goal. All right, let's say that all the atrocities that they claim are in the Old Testament that were done by God's people. He's making the claim that those people in the Old Testament, they're immoral. Well, the things that they did were immoral. But if we climb into his atheistic worldview, the arguments that he's making right now, they produced the ought by defining the goal.
Yes,
they did.
And therefore it was all moral.
Yes. He just refuted everything that they've ever said in regards to the Old Testament.
And that was brilliant. That was brilliant. Good night.
It's one sentence after another sentence after another. all you have to do is listen, and that's how easy it is to point out the folly here.
Yep. Yep.
Right. We're making an ought statement because we have already defined what the goal is. Similarly, when we're talking about morality vis-a-vis well-being, we have defined what the goal is. And the only objection is to say there's no reason, you can give no reason for why.
Notice the circular logic in the question begging. Earlier he said that the goal of morality is well-being, and now he's saying that morality is well-being. Which is it? You see how, he's got this viciously circular definition, unless I'm misunderstanding something here or I heard something incorrectly. Is morality well-being, or is well-being the goal of morality? Which one is it? Can't be both. But of course this whole thing, when an atheist argues morality, they will always beg the question.
They have to.
Yeah, always.
Why we should care about well-being in the first place. And for that, I agree. But once we agree that we do care about well-being, you can now make ought statements because you're saying what you should do in order to achieve the goal.
And that is what I'm getting at, is that we have this secular way of looking at things has no basis for saying we should make well-being a goal.
I agree with you, Zach. Here's the problem. That, like every other objection that's been launched at secular moral systems, is not in any way solved by appealing to a God.
I think that there, like I say, there is a solution there, because if you appeal to a God, there's at least the possibility that there is both an is and an ought there.
The reason why adding God to the equation makes it different is because God is all-knowing. He knows all things. And everyone can agree that if you know all the scenarios, you know what is best. So the more you know about a situation and the impact of that situation and why it's happening, the more you know what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, and God never changes. You need an objective, you need an unchanging standard to compare stuff to, because if it can change at a moment's notice, if we suddenly decide well-being is to kill all of people of a particular, skin color, or women in a particular country, or whoever, that's, it can change at the drop of a hat.
Yes.
That there's something there that
if you appeal to well-being, there is already an is or not there. But the problem that you're saying is, why should we care about well-being? Saying that you think that it's what God wants doesn't get us there. There's no more reason for me to care what your God wants than what somebody else's God wants.
The thing is that if there's a God, and this doesn't seem to be as true in secular morality, but if there's a God, then there could be value statements that are objectively true, and I don't see how value statements could be objectively true under a secular moral system.
Because you've agreed to well-being as a foundation, and after that, it's objectively true that action.
He's using Sam Harris's argument completely. It completely falls apart.
X is or isn't consistent with well-being. The only thing you've done,
right? But you have to agree on that first.
Sure, and you have to agree, Zach. And you have to agree on what God wants.
That's more of a question of knowledge, because
I have no access to anything.
Before, when I paused it before, he just made an absolute claim for morality. I've never heard him say that before.
I must have missed that. What did
he said that if we come to the agreement that wellness is the standard, then we can agree to is and oughts. Absolutely. We can know absolute moral statements.
If we agree, but we can also agree to change it too. So it's not, it's not an absolute thing. If we can agree to change it, you need an unchanging.
Yeah. Mike might, or no, that's an argument for ad populum, right? That's how we make. No, the most people say it if they agree on it.
Well,
yeah, I think.
I mean, I guess in a very technical sense, it would be an ad populum fallacy, but so yeah, people agreeing on morality does not make anything moral. All Germans agreed it was cool to kill Jews. Doesn't make it moral.
That is the argument right here, isn't it? Like he's saying that if we say well-being is the standard, and then we can make the laws what well-being is.
If we can define well-being as a lack of Jews,
it
becomes moral to exterminate Jews.
Right.
So there's your atheist morality right there.
Once again, atheism agrees with Hitler.
Or said.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I just said once again, atheism agrees with Hitler, and I've compared that several times, and everyone goes, "Oh, people always do that." They compare it, but it's true. They can't argue with what Hitler did. They can't argue with any kind of morality.
Right.
I have no way to know what any God wants. And if I'm going to say that I can solve this problem of whether or not we should care about well-being by saying that's what God wants, I've just adopted a massive burden of proof. And even at the end of it, if there is a God, that still doesn't mean that I am in any way impelled to care what that God thinks.
This is just hatred, utter hatred and war against God.
Why religious moral claims cannot solve the problems they raise. Well, you don't have any objective foundation for why you care about well-being. Well, neither do you. You have your opinion, dude, of what God wants. And meanwhile, in the entire history of humanity, people have been arguing over what God is, what God wants. And there's no guarantee that even if God is and God wants, that what God wants is in your best interest. This is the damning thing about religious doctrines, because secular doctrines.
Hold on. The fact that people disagree on their conclusions about what God wants and doesn't want does not mean God is not the standard. All it means is that people are wrong. That's literally all he's proven, is that people can be wrong. Well, congratulations. We agree on that. I believe in the noetic effects of the fall. So congratulations. You've just proven a biblical doctrine correct. But it doesn't say anything about what it is that he's trying to prove, that, well, because people can't agree on what this God wants or doesn't want, he doesn't exist. No, that's again begging the question.
Let me see if I can get back to it, or if it.
Well, I don't know if Matt exists, because I disagree with him. So maybe he just doesn't exist.
I think we just lost the show.
Oh no.
Because when I pressed pause, this time I think it went to the end. Let me refresh this, see what happens. I got nothing.
You keep track of the time on there?
No.
We can't even see the time really with the thing on there.
No, I got to go to their YouTube channel now.
Yeah, because maybe they didn't save it afterwards. They said, "I'll show these guys. I'll show them not to pull themselves up on my bootstraps." As
not sure we'll be able to find it either.
Message said, that's why you need a control room to do that stuff for you.
New glasses. So why not have them delivered to your doorstep? At GlassesUSA.com.
Got a commercial right here.
Please hold. Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Oh, there's a Derek in Nevada. Did we get to Derek in Nevada?
I don't remember a Derek in Nevada.
We'll cover one more phone call.
All right, let's see where this goes.
All right. Turn the volume up.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm a theist, but I mean, I think throughout listening to you and the procession of the call, I think that there were a few things that you said were wrong, even by your own account. And then I have an argument that I kind of want to get to.
Okay. What was I wrong about?
Okay, so the first thing you said is, I wrote it down because I thought it was a bizarre thing to say. It said, you can't point to an actual theist who's called this show with a reasonable evidence-based argument for the existence of God.
Correct.
If you can, it would be the one and only argument that would keep coming up. It would win the Templeton Prize, the Nobel Prize.
I think it would win those prizes, but I was probably a little hyperbolic in saying it was the only argument that would come up. But yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just think that just strikes me as an argumentum ad populum. You know, like, I mean, why couldn't it be the case that there could be an argument that is good that you don't understand is good, and that in fact no one understands is good, or in fact some people understand it's good, but when they try to convince people, the people who are giving out prizes don't understand it. I don't understand the reasoning there.
Yeah, it's not an argument ad populum, because I'm not saying that
all the best arguments don't get the prizes, Matt. Hello. I like that. I like that.
Truth of this is based on
Glenn. You look like you were going to say something.
No, I'm not.
Any sort of popularity of this. It was demonstrably sound in the way of all the other things. We wouldn't be having these debates for thousands of years. Your view that perhaps there's an argument that is truly sound that people just aren't aware that they're sound is...
By that standard, no one would be arguing that the earth is flat today, Matt. If there was an argument that convinced everybody, Matt, we wouldn't have flat earthers walking around right now. So no one can prove anything by that standard.
Self-refuting, because soundness is about recognition.
Well, one thing that's not true, actually. So soundness is a property of arguments such that if the...
Matt's getting his, I'm going to hang up on you.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking too. Like, he's going to hang up on this.
All right, now this guy's challenging me again.
If the argument is in valid logical form and the premises are true, then the conclusion, the argument is...
You're confusing it a little bit. Validity is about the structure of the argument such that true premises lead to true conclusions, and if that is the case for the structure of the structure of the syllogism, it's valid. Soundness addresses whether or not the premises are actually true and or accepted, because the point is, in argumentation, if you accept the sky is blue, whether it's blue or not, if you accept that premise and the structure is valid, and you accept the second premise, you must either accept the conclusion or you are in violation of logical reason.
Well, that's a weird way to define soundness, because...
That's actually the definition of soundness.
Well, let me explain. I gave the definition of soundness is that the premises are true, and then Matt Dillahunty gave the definition of soundness that people accept the premises, but that means that there are all sorts of sound arguments, right? Because there are people who accept...
I'm talking about two different... Derek, I'm talking about two different things. Yes, soundness is about whether or not the premises are true. But as I said, in argumentation, if there is someone who is convinced that a premise is true, convinced that both premises in a syllogism are true, and they want to reject the conclusion, if the structure is valid, they are now in violation of sound reasoning. That's what I said.
Right, so I agree that that's irrational, but what I'm saying is that you can't when you said it was sound, you were saying that if there was a sound argument, then something like everyone would accept it or something along those lines, right? And I'm saying that that's not true.
No.
You have an argument that's logically valid, that's...
I'm talking about whether or not it's demonstrably sound. Not. So you could start with premise one. There's a diamond the size of my fist hidden under a rock on Mars. That can be true, and we'll never have access, or it's unlikely we would ever have access to be able to demonstrate that it's true. But if somebody was convinced that that was the case, that would be a different issue.
Well, so demonstrably sound, you're just saying that they can demonstrate the truth of the premises. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, so the premises themselves are the demonstration of the conclusion, right? And then you have layers upon layers. I mean, you're gonna go on. I mean, obviously, the infinite skeptic can just keep going on, and then you're never going to have any sound arguments. So, because you're not going to be able to demonstrate.
Sure, but that's not a skeptic, and it's a slur to phrase it that way. That's not what skepticism is. But yes, somebody that is flatly going to deny things and get right down to questioning the fabric of reality, yes, they can deny premises until the cows come home.
Like the Dillahunty Dodge. Like the person, I appreciate John Wilkinson's been in the chat today quite a bit, like the person who caused John Wilkinson's head to pop off when he questioned whether babies exist, because he was asked a moral question in regards to treatment of babies. Then the atheist got frustrated and said, well, I'm not sure babies exist. You go past skepticism, you become the Dillahunty Dodge.
Whether there are cows or not.
Whether they're cows or not.
Maybe this rephrasing will help. I am not aware of any argument that's ever been presented on the show for the existence of a God that is both valid in structure and has demonstrably sound premises.
Right. And so, again, I'm just trying to figure out, like, take the evolutionary argument against naturalism, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, I presume that you're a naturalist. I don't know if you're agnostic about that or not.
I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Stop. I don't know if I've ever heard him take a position on a worldview before. So he said he is a methodological naturalist, Tim? Can you hear me?
I'm going to rewind it.
Naturalism, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, I presume that you're a naturalist. I don't know if you're agnostic about that or not.
I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist.
Okay, pause the tape. Because now we can have something that we can nail down Matt Dillahunty on. Methodological naturalism is a strategy for studying the world by which scientists choose not to consider supernatural causes even as a remote possibility.
So it's already assumed.
His position.
So he's sitting here all day long asking for evidence for the supernatural, and he's already rejected it.
And you won't even consider it as even a remote possibility. This is from conservapedia.com. That's also, okay, Rational Wiki says methodological naturalism is the label for a required assumption of philosophical naturalism when working within the scientific method. Methodological naturalism limits their scientific research to the study of natural causes because any to attempt... Okay, hold on. I have to expand this. Methodological limit their scientific research to the study of natural causes because any attempts to define causal relationships with the supernatural are never fruitful and result in the creation of scientific dead ends and God of the gap type hypotheses. To avoid these traps, scientists assume that all causes are empirical and naturalistic, which means they can be measured quantified and studied methodologically. So, right, he automatically
rejects any claim.
Right. So he's playing a little game here, because he asked if he's a naturalist, and he said, well, actually, so he's a naturalist. All right. I don't know if he wants to try to avoid.
What is a philosophical naturalist? Look that up, because he said he's not a philosophical naturalist. As you look it up, I will replay him saying it again.
This rephrasing will help. I am not aware of any argument that's ever been presented on the show for the existence of a God that is both valid in structure and has demonstrably sound premises.
Right. And so, again, I'm just trying to figure out, like, take the evolutionary argument against naturalism, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, I presume that you're a naturalist. I don't know if you're agnostic about that or not.
I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist.
That wasn't the question the guy asked, but I guess it's good to be more specific. What is a philosophical naturalist?
It's the idea or belief that only natural, as opposed to supernatural or spiritual laws and forces operate the world. So basically, everything can be explained through nature. Philosophical naturalism is the doctrine that the natural world is all there is. In other words, that the supernatural is definitionally impossible, since whatever is shown to exist via affecting the natural world is clearly part of the same natural world.
So what is the difference?
Well, there isn't one.
Read the first sentence of methodological.
Let me go back. Give me a moment.
Because it seemed to be very close to that.
Methodological naturalism is the label for the required assumption of philosophical naturalism. Okay, so it's the same thing. It literally says, okay, so methodological naturalism is the label for the required assumption of philosophical naturalism when working with the scientific method. Methodological naturalists limit their scientific research to the study of natural causes, because any attempt to define causal relationships with the supernatural are never fruitful and result in the creation of scientific dead ends and God of the gap type hypotheses. To avoid these traps, scientists assume that all causes are empirical and naturalistic, which means they can be measured, quantified, and studied methodologically. Think about this, Tim.
The two go hand in hand. How can he be one? How can he be one and not the other?
So here's the problem. Using naturalistic methods demonstrate logic. Go to the cupboard and get me 2 cups of logic, please.
Or morality.
Think of Tim. What the scientific method itself. All right. Why under a naturalistic worldview, for it to work, you have to just simply assume all of the laws of nature. You can't truly prove them. You have to assume them. There's a real problem with this. And Gordon Clark, I'm going to look it up. Gordon Clark wrote an excellent refutation of naturalism that I'm going to find. We can continue playing this if you want, and I'll see if I can find this, because he says it much more concisely than I can.
Okay. So methodological naturalism, as I understand it, is that we're not going to incorporate any intentional explanations into our scientific framework. Is that the idea?
It is the recognition that because we cannot demonstrate non-natural causation, that we don't get to appeal to it.
Well, I mean, I guess this is sort of tangential, but like, take something like, you said that there would be someone winning Templeton prizes. I mean, do you think that there are no good, well, I mean, one thing is that Alvin Plantinga in 2017 won the Templeton Prize. But I mean, I don't know if you think that that's evidence for theism or something like that.
No.
I obviously don't think it's evidence for theism, but it just seems like that's evidence that his arguments for theism are good or demonstrably sound.
No, I probably shouldn't have referenced the Templeton Prize, because the fact that they think it's the case doesn't mean it's the case. In a sense, what I was essentially saying is, if there was,
he just nailed him, because the callers. I'm pretty sure he just nailed him, based on how this conversation's going with it. He was calling in to take issue with Dillahunty's argument for that. Hey, if there was a good argument, the prize would be won. And then he pointed out that there was a prize won, and he's like, "Oh well, I shouldn't have said that." Somebody's taking him past pretty
my
good.
standard. Oh.
Len,
I didn't hear it because I was Googling, so I'll have to listen back on the podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
Was a recognizable, valid and sound argument for the existence of God, we wouldn't keep having these discussions and debates, and it'd be front page news, it'd be, Nobel worthy, etc., that somebody had essentially demonstrated the truth of that a God exists.
Do you have a valid and sound argument?
I want, hold on a sec. I want justification for that claim.
This caller's good. He's actually
going to hang up on him pretty quick now. He's starting to get it.
I got to stop Googling and listen. So
yeah,
can back it up just a little bit.
I will.
Matt, I looked up and I saw Matt's posture and countenance. And know he bet. So let's back it up a little bit so I can catch this.
All right. Remember, the caller called in, right? And he said that you said that if there was ever a good argument for God, then it would the matter would be settled. Everyone would use the same argument, and the guy would get a certain prize.
Because we cannot demonstrate non-natural causation, that we don't get to appeal to it.
Well, I mean, I guess this is sort of tangential, but take something like, you said that there would be someone winning Templeton prizes. I mean, do you think that there are no good, one thing is that Alvin Plantinga in 2017 won the Templeton Prize, right? But I mean, I don't know if you think that that's evidence for theism or something like that.
No.
I obviously don't think it's evidence for theism, but it just seems like that's evidence that his arguments for theism are good or demonstrably sound.
No, I probably shouldn't have referenced the Templeton Prize, because the fact that they think it's the case doesn't mean it's the case. In a sense, what I was essentially saying is, if there was a recognizable, valid and sound argument for the existence of God, we wouldn't keep having these discussions and debates, and it'd be front page news, it'd be, Nobel worthy, etc., that somebody had essentially demonstrated the truth of that a God exists.
Do you have a valid and sound argument?
I want, hold on a sec. I want justification for that claim. If there were a valid and sound argument, we would expect it in the newspapers, well, all that stuff.
I would just
justification.
I would just like a valid and sound argument here.
Yeah, I'd love for somebody to actually present an argument rather than tiptoeing around all this other stuff. But I don't know what to tell you, Derek. If you think that somebody could actually come up with a proper, valid and sound argument for the existence of God, and this would not hit the news, I don't know what to tell you.
The caller is excellent, because he watched the show. He saw a point where Matt made a truth claim, and he's holding it to him. He's holding him to it. He's backed off on 2 points so far, and now all he wants to do is, hey, prove something else. Prove something else.
Dodge, dodge, dodge.
He's been nailed a couple times.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
Well, so you just believe that claim, right?
Yes, I am convinced that if somebody could prove there was a God, we would hear about it in the news and from organizations that are intent on doing this. I think that the motivations of people, countless theists surrounding the globe, if they finally could present a valid and sound argument for the existence of their God, I think we would hear about that. And instead, what we hear, instead of hearing that argument, what we hear are countless other arguments been trotted out over years that don't do the case. You got Bill Craig doing the Kalam cosmological argument, which doesn't have God in any premise or the conclusion.
The caller didn't call to make an argument for God. The caller called to call you out on your claim. Control room.
Has anyone ever asked Matt what evidence that he would accept in any of the debates that you know of?
Yeah. Who was it? Sai? Was it Sai that asked him that? Or was it who asked him that?
I don't remember, but remember his position as a methodological naturalist. As a methodological naturalist, he automatically dismisses the supernatural. So there is no evidence admissible in the courtroom of his mind in any practical sense. So him even asking for evidence, he isn't going to accept anything. Just show me evidence. Just show me evidence. Matt, you're a methodological naturalist. And by the definition on Rational Wiki, it says that it says right here, the study of I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this word for word, but basically it is he's forced to dismiss the supernatural because they're question begging, they're unfruitful, and this from the article result in the creation of scientific dead ends. So
can that even be science, though? Because you can't rule things out in science, really. You can't just say, oh, no, we just won't accept anything, even if it goes that way. I don't, that's not science.
Exactly.
You
nailed it, brother. You nailed it right there. That if you're going to dismiss any evidence, then or if you're going to dismiss the possibility of any supernatural conclusion, then of course anything that proves the supernatural is automatically inadmissible in the courtroom of your mind. So you're not doing science anymore. You're just giving your arbitrary, foolish opinion.
I'm responding to a comment and I lost my train of thought. What I was going to say, because you guys are making good points. Let's go on. All right. Instead of trying to respond to the comment, I will say to Ecclesiastes in the comment feed on YouTube, who says that the caller is actually the realistic nihilist, Josh. I don't know that Josh is now a theist who's changed his name to Derek and lives in Nevada, or if he called claiming, why do you think it's the realistic nihilist on this phone call? Put your answer in.
I saw that comment and I started listening real closely to the voice. That's not Josh. We've had enough conversations with him, both privately and publicly. I know his voice. That's not him.
I remember the thing that I forgot now. So, control room, John asked, has anybody asked Dillahunty what would it take to convince you? Matt's response to that has been repeatedly, I don't know, but God would know, so it's up to him to show me. That's his response.
Okay.
And that's being trotted out as if it's evidence for the existence or an argument for the existence of God. So why is it that the greatest apologists on the planet aren't actually using these arguments if in fact they exist? That is my thing. That's not an appeal to popularity. If in fact there were good arguments for God, why aren't the best apologists using them?
Well, they might be. You just might not accept them, and those good arguments might not be in the news. So
yes,
I'm just saying that the claim that you're...
This is the argumentum ad stubbornness or argumentum ad idiot.
Argument ad denial.
You made a claim that any good argument is going to be in the news or something like that, right?
Yes, that is what I'm convinced is likely the case.
That claim. Right, but why?
I mean, we regularly, how many times have we found Noah's Ark and that's in the news?
All right, let me ask you a question. Do you think that...
Len, it's the realistic nihilist posing as a theist just for the sake, that's what they're saying in the comment thread, just for the sake of argumentation enjoyment.
that there are any good arguments for materialism?
I don't know how that's relevant, and I've already pointed out that I'm not a philosophical materialist.
Well, I'll explain how it's. I'm not predicating you with any position. I'll explain how it's relevant if you just like to answer the question.
I am not convinced. Here's the easy answer to your distraction. I am not convinced that there are sound arguments for hard materialism. That's why I'm not a materialist.
Right. So do you think that there are no good arguments for moral realism?
What does that have to do with this?
Eddie argues like him too. It's definitely
the more they might be right.
Yeah,
That'd
they're
be
right.
Funny.
Yeah.
You think that's Josh?
That's Josh. Yeah,
that's funny.
So for those of you who are new to this engagement here, Josh, the realistic nihilist, debated Seitan Bruggencate on this YouTube channel
years ago. 4 years ago, probably 5 years.
And we knew him before that.
Yes.
We've talked to him for hours and hours upon hours, and so have the Google Plus guys. Nice guy, nice enough
He's
guy.
A good guy, and a heck of a guitarist.
But the thing that happened, unfortunately, to him is that he lost the debate with Sai within the first few minutes because he switched it. I hit the microphone. Sorry, microphone. Sorry, listeners. Because he switched his position right there. He's like, oh, well, I'm going to argue from this position now. Well, no, you can't do that. See you later. And I think we hung up on him. But then Sai was like, all right, bring him back. Let him argue his whatever, argued from a different position. So now here he is calling the atheist experience, claiming to be a theist.
This is hilarious.
So
this is a guy. So, you know, Josh has had enough experience with presuppositionalists, like much like you can play a really good atheist. He can play a pretty good theist, apparently.
He spent some of the greatest engagements didn't he engage with our Christian guy in the Carolinas, Dustin Seegers?
Yes.
Dustin talked to him for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, all I need to do to falsify his hypothesis is find something that he thinks there are good arguments for that is not published in the news, right? Because that's the criterion for falsification, presumably?
No, and see, that seems to be backwards, because my point is that all the bad arguments are out there, and there are good arguments for things that are out there, but I'm unaware of any good arguments for things that aren't out there. And given that there are a bunch of people, who are constantly working on this and have a vested interest in convincing people, one would presume, not assert with certainty, that if in fact there was a valid and sound argument for the existence of God, we would be aware of it. If it exists among humans, we would be aware of it because somebody would share it, right? And it would be pointed out by apologists left and right. Here it is.
His assumption is, Len, his assumption is if there was a good argument there, that people would accept it.
Yeah.
And what's his basis for saying that?
Right. And it's so weird because like debates happen all the time, politically and philosophically and religiously, and yet people who are proven wrong rarely change their minds or change their positions. So I mean, there's that whole thing. You know, he's not operating in reality here.
The one we've been looking for, so that we don't have to trot out the Quran.
But what I'm saying, the reason I was drawing an analogy to something like materialism is because there may be valid and sound arguments for materialism. There may be valid and sound arguments for other metaphysical hypotheses. But the point is that just because that doesn't mean that people aren't going to disagree with them. In fact, it doesn't mean that
I didn't say anything. I was not talking about whether or not people agree or disagree. I was talking about awareness.
Matt said that if there was a good argument, everyone who called his show would use the same argument. That's what he said.
This is such a facepalm moment.
And I would argue that if there is a logical, valid, and sound argument for something of any note, that if we're not aware of it, it doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, I'm saying there might be sound.
We should all call up the show and just say, God exists. You know, each and every one. There's a great argument right here.
Have caller after caller.
Yeah, caller after caller. We all
using the same
arguments that exist now that I'm
sure.
So do you have one?
Do you have one?
Well, we could talk about that. As long as you're in agreement with me, then I think that what you said, you disagree with what you said previously in the show.
I'm saying, so is it possible that there's a sound argument that we're not aware of? Is that what you're getting to?
No, I'm saying that, well, maybe not you specifically, but one of the arguments that you dealt with is sound and that you just are mistaken somewhere along the line.
Sure.
And in fact, a lot of people have that same confusion, and it's not at all likely that we would expect that everyone would be able to understand.
I didn't say everyone, but I'm not an idiot, and I've studied this for my entire life.
All right. Well, another thing I guess I wanted to talk about
is nothing.
Yeah. That's how Josh does it. All right. Next thing I want to talk about. And the next thing I want to talk about. He's a good guy.
Do you have an argument for the existence of God?
Well, I do.
Okay.
But I'm a bit confused about one thing that you said in regards to the call with the previous caller. So I think that you're using sort of an idiosyncratic definition of objective morality, because the way I understand it is that objective morality is what one ought to do, full stop. That is irrespective of the beliefs and desires and aims of agents.
And we argued with him about that for hours and hours.
You can say you taught him everything he knows. You helped with this phone call. You guys helped with this phone call.
This is the exact argument I had with him and Wittgensteinian like 4 years ago. This is almost the identical argument. I bet we can find that video on the channel.
At least he's listening to you. He's paying attention.
Well, what's sad here, dude? Here's the sad thing is that he just sees this as sport to tie up Matt Dillahunty in knots here.
And that's what he did.
He's not going to get the gospel here.
And that's what he did with us too.
Yeah.
It was for sport.
Right. Exactly.
And here's the take. I'm sorry, Len. You haven't spoken up much and I'm talking over you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying that you can win arguments with atheists. Even atheists pretending to be Christians can out-argue other atheists, smart atheists, deceptive atheists even. And the thing is that there's going to be no gospel here. This is all just sport, fun, and games. And let's remember, both the caller and the host, what their state is before God and what's going to happen to them if they die in that state. That's what we should not be laughing at here. Is it in our flesh kind of fun to watch Matt Dillahunty get owned when he's shown his own contradictions and folly? Yeah, it is. But let's try to keep the greater thing in mind here, that this guy outside of faith, he is going to hell.
And then what I was going to say is, we used to sit in those Google Hangouts for hours, and Dustin Seeger sat in a hangout for 3 hours, just talking philosophy with Josh, who's posing as Derek from Nevada, Josh in Colorado. Sat there and engaged with him for hours. And, Dustin has talked to me about it. There's no use in doing it anymore, because and then last time Dustin Seegers debated Benjamin Duncan on this YouTube channel, it was more about the gospel. and after the debate, Dustin was like, I could go around in circles with him on philosophy, but what's the use? He needs the gospel. He doesn't need to be convinced. And a lot of apologists who know a lot of philosophy will just, for the sport, go round for round with a non-believer, rarely touching on the gospel.
Yeah.
But you seem to reject that notion, right? Like, I'm not sure what you, because that's the way objective morality is sort of standardly used. And so you're using sort of an idiosyncratic definition. I just want to make sure by objective morality, you mean as long as the goal is X, one ought to do X. And that's
correct. As I said 35 times in the previous call, and over the many years that I've discussed this, I go into great detail that what I'm talking about is situational ethics. That what I'm talking about is once you have decided and agreed upon a goal, that there are objective assessments that can be made, or non-subjective assessments that can be made with respect to that goal. That's it.
Okay, so I just
what you seem to be doing is suggesting that that there's an objective moral reference that is in fact more akin to what I would call absolute morality, and I have strive for years to point out the difference between absolute morality and an objective moral system.
Well, I think that God is co-intentional with the good. And that, I mean, I guess that takes a lot of explaining, but I think so I think that the good, I actually believe in objective morality, and I think that the good is what one ought to do, full stop, but I'm a sort of constructivist in that I think that there's a way in which agents can be constructed such that there's a correct and incorrect way to perceive motivating properties. But that's all, it takes a long time to get into.
Yeah, and basically you said the same thing the last caller did, that God and good are co-equal.
Co-intentional.
Sure.
Right. So, right. So I mean, I can explain that view, but I just kind of wanted to I just want to make sure.
I can explain that view. I don't think that's his blue view.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right. Insofar as the standard sort of definitions go, you're not a moral realist, right? You're a moral anti-realist.
What is your standard definition of moral realist? Because what I've said repeatedly is that the physical facts about reality are the foundation by which you determine whether or not your outcomes are consistent with well-being as a foundation. That's it.
The physical facts of reality are the foundation, which, let me interpret him, because he admits that he cannot know what reality is. He admits that. So what he's saying when he says physical facts about reality are the foundation for blah, 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 what he's saying is, I have no foundation. That's what he's saying.
Yep.
Right, but what one ought to do. So, like, what I want to do is say, you don't think that your notion of morality is detached from what one should or shouldn't do you? Or is it completely detached from what one should or shouldn't do?
No, provided that we agree on well-being as a goal, there are things one should and shouldn't do.
And you could change the first sentence to anything. Change it to, we don't like this particular race. We all don't like this particular race. So we can decide what we should and shouldn't do. It's like void of meaning, what he's saying. There's like,
well, yeah, that's the thing. You're not talking about, you aren't defining well-being. If well-being means that there's no more Jews in our society, I mean, then
that's the goal. That was Hitler's goal. Get rid of the Jews. That's my goal. He was going for his goal. So does that make it moral?
Yeah, by his standard, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but if someone has alternative goals, presumably they should do those too, right?
Yes. If you're playing chess and you have a goal of not winning, then there are things that you should do. But I prefer to play chess with the people who care about winning. And I prefer to live life with the people who care about living.
So it seems so. Like, what morality is then to you?
I don't care if it's morality. As I've said over and over again, including there in that call, I don't care if you call it morality or if anybody calls it morality. I'm talking about well-being. You either care about well-being or you don't. But what I would like to know from somebody who wants to say that well-being isn't morality, okay, what is there about morality that is true and useful that isn't encompassed by well-being? Because
he's redefining well-being.
Yeah.
He's totally redefined well-being.
Well, remember that he said well-being is the goal of morality, but morality is well-being. So what the heck is he even talking about?
I wish this would have been the first caller. This is a good this is a good one.
Yeah, I usually don't go this long, but
yeah.
That yet.
Well, I think that what you're doing there is that you're taking an extension of morality, which is that it's well-being, and saying that it's reducible to the other, which is not true. I don't think. I mean, I don't even think that you would assent to that. It just happens to be that what's coextensive.
You just keep telling me what you think, and you won't say why. And the why is what I care about.
I'm just trying to. I'm sort of just.
You can say the same thing to him.
Because
Yep.
You could say the same thing to Matt Dillahunty. Ugh, he's so frustrating. Sorry.
The official definition of well-being is void of any reference to morality.
Well, you chewed up a bunch of time here, and we've got 4 minutes left.
Yeah, we've spent a bunch of time getting me to repeat things.
Right, but I'm like I said, I'm just trying to get a good handle on your position, because you use a lot of idiosyncratic language, and I think that you not being careful with as much experience as you have is detrimental to your cause, right? Because it was like
you called because you're concerned about how detrimental I am to my cause.
That's so
I'm
sweet.
concerned about rationality. I'm concerned about rationality, and I think that if you're doing things that are detrimental to your cause, that's irrational.
If you and I agree that we want to win a game of chess, do you agree that we can derive ought moves and valuations of position with respect to that goal?
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that
if you and I agree on well-being,
oughts are reducible.
If you and I agree on well-being, do you not think that we can derive the same sort of right moves, wrong moves from that?
Yeah, I think that if well-being is a goal, then there are things that conduce to well-being and things that do not conduce to well-being.
So you and I are in agreement, and yet you're concerned that I'm not being rational or doing damage to my position.
Well, you keep calling it objective morality.
No. I have not. I've spent years correcting the people.
He is so talking about. Of course he.
Wait, let's rewind it. Where you said objective morality. Yeah. Hello.
As long as we can agree that well-being is. Here's what we need to do. We need wingnut callers to call in next week and ask him to define well-being and give different scenarios. Well, what if I agree? What if you and I disagree on what well-being is? I think that would be great. And I think we should have a prize for any wingnut callers that get through. I don't know. Get a sticker or something. A smiley sticker.
Get a smiley sticker.
Like you, who have this view of objective morality, which I think is really probably better described as absolute. I've specifically said over and over, including this call, exactly what I'm talking about when I say that morality is objective, that there are non-subjective evaluations of consequences of actions with respect to a goal. And if you have some other usage of that, that's clearly not what I'm talking about.
Right. But that's when I asked you that your notion of morality is detached from what one ought do. And that's true.
No.
That's true because of what you said, right? You said
oh my
that
God,
morality
goodbye.
Oh, what a coward. What a coward.
He was looking for a reason to hang up on him.
He was just about to show Matt where he was self-contradictory. and Matt saw it coming because he was saying, hold on, now you said, and he's like, goodbye.
Yep.
Isn't that interesting?
Let's replay.
Well, you keep calling it objective morality.
No. I have not.
Okay, so you don't.
I've spent years correcting the people like you who have this view of objective morality, which I think is really probably better described as absolute. I've specifically said over and over, including this call, exactly what I'm talking about when I say that morality is objective, that there are non-subjective evaluations of consequences of actions with respect to a goal. And
what is non-subjective? Instead of calling them objective, he says non-subjective.
Yeah. I'm not a naturalist. I'm a, what did he call it? I don't even remember. I've deleted the Google.
Methodological naturalist.
I'm not a naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist.
No, he was asked if he was a naturalist. He said, no, I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist, which we know are the same thing. Sounds pretty smart, Matt.
Yeah, sounds smart. Yeah, that's what I
don't know what definition, what dictionary he's going off of, but definitely not the one Len read from.
And if you have some other usage of that, that's clearly not what I'm talking about.
Right, but that's when I asked you that your notion of morality is detached from what one ought do, and that's true.
No,
that's true because of what you said. Like you said,
oh my
that
God,
morality
goodbye.
You said that when he started quoting him, that's it.
Yep.
Nah.
Can't have that.
See, now, could it be that let's go back to what his original point was. Could it be that you have heard arguments that you don't understand, or
it could be that you already know God exists and everything in the Bible, things of God, are spiritually discerned?
That was the most frustrating.
I can say I can
been so simultaneously frustrated and entertained in my life.
Now I must admit I have hung up on Josh more than Matt has. I have booted Josh from Hangouts more, probably 10 times more.
Right, but the thing is,
he's been in a lot of Hangouts.
You know why? Because Josh does what Matt Dillahunty did. It's for the opposite reason, because you get Josh to start contradicting himself and he'll take on different positions, because Josh is a smart dude. He's studied a lot of philosophy. I've talked to him on the phone. We've had a lot of private conversations, and it's been probably 3 years, probably 2 or 3 years since I've had any real meaningful conversations with him. But I know that at one time he was like part of a philosophy club in his community that met regularly and read books and discussed ideas, which, by the way, I think is fantastic. I think that's a great idea. But because he is so educated on these issues, he'll just, I'm not going to say like he's tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine or anything like that, but because he knows all these different philosophical positions, he can argue all of them. So once it's like playing whack-a-mole with the guy.
Yeah.
Let's
see how
Matt. You knock down naturalism, he'll become an imperialist. An imperialist. You knock down imperialism, he'll become a moral nihilist. You knock down moral, and he'll just go down the list and just keep popping up different ones. So
that's right. His YouTube channel was the Realistic Nihilist, and that's the point that Cy ten Bruggencate refuted within seconds. You're a moral nihilist, right? And then he's like, well, for this debate, I'm going to be arguing from this position. And Cy said, okay, you're gone.
Yep.
But
right, because we want to actually argue with people who hold to a conviction.
Right.
Yeah. So hey, it would be fun do you have that video? I wonder how quickly we could find the video of the Realistic Nihilist. Remember the first engagement we had with him?
We've got the one that Bible Thumping Wingnut is. That's somewhere. But I don't know what are you talking about? I want to hear what Matt says after he hangs up on
that. That's a different show.
We have like a minute left, and I'm not going to get to hear a valid and sound argument for God today.
It's just, so here's the thing. I talk a lot. I run around the world educating people about skepticism, about morality.
You run around the world in your hatred for God, making a really good living.
Morality, about atheism, about reason. And one of the things, I don't claim any expertise on anything. If there's anything I'm good at, it's taking complex topics and making them easy to understand, because that's what I do for me. The fact that I'm not using, in every case, the specific language that somebody else is using shouldn't be a problem if, when I'm talking a lot, I clearly say, here's what I'm saying and here's what I mean. If only thing I'd ever done is come in and say, I advocate for objective morality, bam, then you might have a point. But as I've been on here for years, a decade, offering monumental amounts of clarity with regard to what I'm saying, and you call to say, so let me see if I understand you. You have an idiosyncratic view of this that's blah, blah. Yeah, clearly it was clear enough for you to understand this. And then you pretend like, oh, well, I'm just worried that, about rationality and about whether or not you're hurting your cause. Bullshit.
No, he is worried about you doing that because he's an atheist, you dingbat. You just been pwned by your own team.
Pwned.
You are not at all concerned about whether or not I'm hurting my cause. You are looking to either trap me in some sort of, Matt's a dilettante who's not particularly, hey, Matt's bald, has a gray beard, he's a dilettante who didn't take any philosophy classes, who's self-taught, and yet somehow or another, I still got you to call me.
Oh, and that's the big win. Anybody who calls, see that? Okay, look at this. So we win under
we call him.
under that argument, right, Len? All these people who tell us to call the show, we're winning by not calling.
Yep, exactly.
We win. That's the third time at least tonight.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
This is a man whose ego is boosted every time somebody calls. So no one, if you disagree with him, you can't call him, because just by calling, he wins.
Right.
This has become the best show that we've ever done on this atheist experience. It started out slow.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, I sent you a short clip from Greg Bonson on naturalism. Do you want to play it? It's like 2.5 minutes. Let's see what Bonson
If naturalism is true, that is, that all that exists is the natural order, and there isn't anything that goes beyond man's experience in time. If naturalism is true, then the naturalist has no reason to believe his naturalism. You write that down and I'll explain why it's true. If naturalism is true, the naturalist has no reason to believe it. Has no reason to believe it. Because, you see, naturalism says all of our thinking is just electrical chemical responses. All of our thinking is subject to the laws of chemistry and physics, which is to say all of our thinking is determined by the factors in the physical world or in the physical brain in the environment around us. All of our thinking is, in principle, predictable then, because it's just following the laws of nature. Usually, more sophisticatedly put, the laws of physics and biology and chemistry and so forth. But the point is, human thinking is just the species of the physical world and its operation. Human thinking is just, it's on the same order, but not the same level of sophistication as weeds growing. And so if naturalism is true, then the person who's propounding it is propounding it why? Because his or her brain has required them by the laws of physics and chemistry and biology to say this sort of thing. It's not as though they have the freedom and self-awareness to think about different theories, evaluate evidence, and make a choice as to which is right or wrong. They just have to say whatever they have to say. And that's why the irony is that a naturalist would promote naturalism and try to tell people it's true. You should believe that and not supernaturalism. The answer is, if naturalism is true, so that your brain is just working on the laws of physics, then you have no reason to believe naturalism is true. It's just the laws of physics requiring you to say that. Which is just to say, if naturalism is true, there's no reason to say that naturalism is true. You're just forced to say that, just like I'm forced by the laws of physics to say the opposite. Unbelievers cannot even account for why we argue with each other then, can they? On their assumptions, there's no argument because there's no freedom to choose the truth over against error. There's just the laws of physics governing my brain to say and do whatever it does.
That is it.
And you can just drop the mic right there. So yeah, next week maybe a wingnut will call in and play that.
Well, you can't call in now. I mean, if you call in, he wins.
If you call in, he wins. Yep.
That's very grown up of him. Hey, you called in.
Tim, any atheist who argues with me has lost the debate because it's me they're arguing against.
Well, they have to call in. I mean, if anybody ever came in on our show, like showed up, everybody who ever debated Matt Slick, anybody who came in for Slick answers, well, Matt won because they showed up.
Hundreds of atheists owned over the last 3 years.
He wins. Winning.
We could win pretty soon because I got some really, really cool stuff as far as call in and video in and all this other stuff that I'm setting up in the webcast control room.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up. Sorry about the volume there on the end there. That just maxed everybody out on the recording because I had Bonson turned way up because his volume was low, and then John came in. Anyway, if you appreciate what we're doing here, if you're still listening, you probably appreciate what we're doing, which is very few people. So if you'd consider supporting us, that would be grand. Go to BibleThumpingWingnut.com, click on support our ministry. And if you become a Patreon supporter, send me your address within the United States of America. I will send you a book called Why We're Protestant and a Bible Thumping Wingnut t-shirt, $5 or more on Patreon. And I will send that out to you immediately. And there's other ways to give also. So also check out all the other podcasts, BibleThumpingWingnut.com. Feedback at BibleThumpingWingnut@gmail.com. Until next week, take care. I'll see you later. Were you, John, saying something? Who's saying something? Nothing?
I'm trying to.
All right. See ya.